Friends, let me begin with a simple question. How many times can a system ignore its cracks before it finally shatters? Something big is about to hit America, and the signs are everywhere. You can feel it in your grocery bill, you can see it in the boarded up shops on Main Street, and you can hear it in the anxious conversations of working people who know deep down that the so called American dream has become a nightmare for most. What is this big thing coming? It's not one single event. It is the accumulation of decades of inequality, financial instability, political paralysis, and social unrest. We are living inside an economy that puts profit before people. And when you do that long enough, the results are predictable. A society where wages stagnate, debts rise, and entire generations wonder whether they will ever own a home, afford health care, or retire with dignity. The cracks are not small, they are widening into chasms. Now, the political establishment tells us, don't worry, the market will correct itself. Technology will save us, growth will return. But let me be blunt, these are not solutions, they are excuses. The reality is that when wealth and power concentrate in the hands of a few, the majority pay the price. And the American working class has been paying it for far too long. Whether you are a factory worker in Ohio, a teacher in Texas, or a nurse in California, the struggle is the same. You work harder, you get less, and you are told to be grateful for whatever crumbs are left. Something big is coming because people are reaching their limit. History teaches us this truth. When the gap between rich and poor grows too wide, when governments serve the interests of corporations over citizens, and when the promises of democracy are betrayed, the people push back. That pushback can take many forms: protests, strikes, new movements, even new political parties. And make no mistake, America is moving in that direction. When we talk about rising inequality in America, we are not describing a minor imbalance or a passing trend. We are talking about a fundamental reshaping of our society over the past 4 decades, a transformation so deep that it has left the majority of Americans questioning whether the rules of the game were ever meant to benefit them at all. The simple truth is this: the wealth of this country is being pulled upward into the hands of the few at a rate never before seen in modern history, while the vast majority of workers see little to no improvement in their standard of living. Ask yourself this: how is it possible that the United States produces more wealth today than at any other point in history, yet most Americans report they are living paycheck to paycheck? How is it possible that corporate profits soar to record highs, yet wages for ordinary workers barely keep pace with inflation, if at all? The answer lies in who controls the wealth we create and how that wealth is distributed. For decades, the economic system has rewarded the top 1% with unimaginable riches while leaving the majority with stagnation, debt, and insecurity. Consider the numbers. Since the 1970s, worker productivity in America has risen dramatically. Workers today produce more goods and services in fewer hours than ever before. But while productivity went up, wages did not. Instead, the gains from this increased efficiency flowed into the pockets of shareholders, executives, and financial institutions. In other words, the fruits of labor were taken from those who produced them and handed to those who already had the most. That is not a glitch in the system. That is how the system was designed to work. And yet, inequality is not only about numbers, it is about lived experiences. It is the teacher in Detroit working a second job to make ends meet, while billionaire CEOs receive tax cuts they don't even need. It is the single mother in Texas spending half her paycheck on rent, while luxury developers build high-rise condos that sit half empty as speculative investments. It is the young graduate in California drowning in student debt, while Wall Street banks collect record bonuses. These are not isolated stories. Are the reality of tens of millions of Americans who wonder why they work harder every year only to feel poorer and more insecure. Now, some defenders of the system will say inequality is natural, it rewards hard work and innovation. But let us ask the hard question. Did Jeff Bezos become one of the richest men in the world because he alone worked harder than millions of warehouse employees lifting boxes day and night? Did Wall Street bankers truly earn bonuses larger than the lifetime earnings of school teachers? The rhetoric of hard work masks the reality of exploitation. What we are seeing is not meritocracy, it is monopoly. It is not innovation, it is extraction. And the consequences of this rising inequality reach far beyond economics. They tear at the fabric of democracy itself. When wealth concentrates, so does power. The richest Americans fund campaigns, lobby politicians, and shape policy to serve their interests. The result is a government that too often works for the few at the expense of the many. This is why working families struggle to see their concerns addressed, while corporate giants receive subsidies, tax loopholes, and regulatory breaks. Inequality is not just unfair, it is corrosive to democracy. The hook we must not miss is this. History shows us that no society can sustain such extreme inequality indefinitely. Sooner or later, the tension between the promises of prosperity and the lived reality of deprivation reaches a breaking point. The American working class is already at a moment of reckoning. Strikes are increasing, protests are louder, and new movements are taking shape. These are not accidents. They are signs that people understand something is profoundly wrong. Rising inequality is not just a statistic, it is a ticking clock. When we talk about systemic instability in America, we are talking about the growing sense that the ground beneath us is no longer steady. People may not use technical terms like financialized economy or structural imbalance, but they feel the effects every day. They feel it in the unpredictability of their job security, in the volatility of prices at the supermarket, in the relentless rise of rents and mortgages, and in the anxiety of never knowing if the next downturn will wipe them out completely. The truth is that the American economic system is no longer built to provide stability for the majority. It is built to maximize profits for the few, regardless of the costs to everyone else. Here's a question worth asking. How can the so-called strongest economy in the world leave nearly half its population unable to cover a $400 emergency expense? How can the wealthiest nation in human history witness wave after wave of foreclosures, bankruptcies, and layoffs whenever there is the slightest downturn in global markets? These are not isolated events. They are the predictable results of a system that has made instability a permanent feature of life. Look at the financial crises of recent memory. The crash of 2008 was not a natural disaster. It was a man-made collapse, the direct outcome of deregulated banks, speculative gambling, and a government unwilling to check corporate greed. Millions lost their homes, their jobs, and their savings. Yet the institutions responsible were not punished. They were bailed out. And what message did that send? That instability can be created, suffered by the people, and then used as a profit opportunity for the very corporations who caused it. Is it any surprise then that we are now staring down the possibility of yet another crisis? But instability does not just come from Wall Street, it is baked into everyday life. For workers, jobs are more precarious than ever. The gig economy, hailed as flexible and innovative, is in reality a system of disposable labor. A driver, a delivery worker, or a freelancer has no benefits, no retirement, no healthcare security, and often no consistent wage. That is not stability. That is a gamble, a constant bet that tomorrow will somehow bring enough work to survive. For families, that gamble is exhausting, and it creates a society living one paycheck away from disaster. The same instability is evident in housing. Prices swing wildly depending on speculation and investment trends, not human needs. A family may save for years to buy a home, only to see corporate investors swoop in, purchase entire neighborhoods, and drive up rents beyond reach. Healthcare is another source of instability, where one illness can mean bankruptcy. In no other advanced nation is the health of citizens tied so cruelly to their wallets. These are not isolated failures. They are the symptoms of a system that thrives on keeping people insecure. And here is the hook: instability is not accidental, it is profitable. Corporations make money from crises. Landlords profit from shortages. Insurers profit from fear. Pharmaceutical companies profit from illness. When instability drives people into desperation, it creates opportunities for those positioned at the top of the economic hierarchy to exploit. This is why nothing changes, because instability is not a bug in the system, it is a feature. The danger, of course, is that no society can operate indefinitely on such shaky ground. People may endure insecurity for a while, but when the instability becomes the norm, trust begins to collapse. Trust in markets, trust in institutions, trust in government, it all begins to erode. And once that trust is gone, what remains? The stage is set for political upheaval, for movements that demand an entirely new system rather than cosmetic reforms. So we return to the central point. America is not simply experiencing random shocks or temporary turbulence. It is living inside a system that produces instability by design. And the question that hangs over all of us is not whether another crisis will come, it is when, and what kind of society will emerge on the other side. That is the storm gathering on the horizon, and pretending otherwise will not stop it from hitting. When people talk about American politics today, one word comes up again and again: stuck. Stuck in gridlock, stuck in partisan bickering, stuck in a cycle of promises never fulfilled. This paralysis is not a minor inconvenience. It is a profound symptom of a system that has lost the ability to respond to the needs of its people. At a time when wages are stagnating, when healthcare costs are crushing families, when climate change threatens entire communities, and when inequality grows to historic levels, the political establishment appears more interested in theater than in solutions. And the question that millions of Americans are quietly asking is, how long can a democracy function if it cannot act? Think about it. Every election season, candidates rise to the podium with soaring rhetoric, pledging to fight for working families, to fix broken systems, to restore faith in government. Yet, once in office, those promises collide with a wall of corporate lobbying, partisan warfare, and endless procedural deadlock. Healthcare reform becomes watered down. Tax reform becomes giveaways to the wealthy. Climate action becomes symbolic gestures without substance. Cycle repeats. And ordinary people are left wondering whether their votes actually matter. Is it any wonder that faith in government has dropped to historic lows? But here is the deeper truth. Paralysis is not just about partisanship. It is about power. The American political system has been captured by wealth. Campaigns cost billions, and those billions come not from average workers, but from corporations, banks, and billionaires. So when politicians arrive in Washington, who do they serve first? The donors who funded them or the voters who elected them? The answer is written in every tax loophole for the rich, every subsidy for oil companies, every deregulation for Wall Street. Paralysis is not accidental. It is the byproduct of a system where money speaks louder than people. And while the gridlock plays out on Capitol Hill, real lives are at stake. A family choosing between rent and groceries does not have the luxury of waiting for Congress to find bipartisan compromise. A worker stuck in a gig job without health care cannot wait years for lawmakers to decide whether health care is a right. A community devastated by floods and fires cannot sit by while politicians argue over climate policy. Paralysis in Washington translates into pain, insecurity, and suffering across the country. Every delay, every stalemate has a human cost. Now consider the hook that should keep us awake at night. Paralysis does not mean nothing happens. It means the wrong things happen. While politicians argue endlessly about symbolic culture war issues, corporations quietly push through policies that benefit them. While the public debates left versus right, the real divide, top versus bottom, goes unchallenged. Paralysis creates the perfect cover for powerful interests to tighten their grip, because when government cannot act on behalf of the people, it becomes all too easy for it to act on behalf of the elite. History teaches us that governments which fail to deliver for their citizens eventually lose legitimacy. People begin to doubt not only the politicians, but the system itself. That is where America stands today. Poll after poll shows rising distrust in Congress, in the presidency, in the courts, even in the very idea of democracy. When paralysis becomes the norm, cynicism takes root, and when cynicism spreads, it opens the door for demagogues, leaders who promise to break the gridlock by any means necessary, even if it means undermining democratic institutions. That path is not hypothetical. It is the road many nations have taken before in moments of political failure. The tragedy is that America is not paralyzed because solutions are impossible. We know what policies could address inequality, provide health care, strengthen labor rights, and tackle climate change. The paralysis exists because those solutions threaten powerful interests. To admit that is to see clearly the problem is not lack of ideas, it is lack of will. And until that will is reclaimed by the people, the paralysis will continue, deepening the crisis of faith in the very system meant to serve us. Walk into any workplace, any classroom, any neighborhood gathering, and you can feel it in the air, frustration. It is the quiet sigh of the nurse finishing a double shift with no raise in years. It is the grumble of the teacher watching funding vanish from her classroom while billionaires build their third mansion. It is the exhaustion of the delivery driver whose pay depends on an algorithm that values speed over human dignity. Frustration is not hidden anymore. It is bubbling, it is spilling over, and it is beginning to take form as a collective awareness that something in America's system is profoundly broken. Ask yourself this: why are strikes becoming more common again? Why are workers in industries long considered docile, from baristas to warehouse employees, suddenly demanding union representation? Why are so many young people declaring that capitalism itself has failed them? These are not random events. They are expressions of a society in which millions of people feel that no matter how hard they work, the rewards never flow their way. Frustration has become the common denominator across jobs, classes, and regions. And when frustration is this widespread, it is more than a mood, it is a warning. The frustration begins with economics. For decades, Americans were told, work hard, play by the rules, and you will climb the ladder. But what happens when the ladder is pulled up. Wages stagnate, rents climb, healthcare costs soar, and student debt shackles entire generations. People see themselves doing everything right, yet falling further behind. That contradiction between effort and reward breeds resentment, it breeds anger, and eventually it breeds defiance. But frustration is not only about personal hardship, it is also about betrayal. People look at the political establishment and feel abandoned. They see promises made, then broken. They see politicians siding with donors while ignoring constituents. They see bailouts for corporations while families face foreclosure. Every broken promise adds another layer to the frustration because nothing stings more than hope turned into disillusionment. So the phrase you hear again and again is, the system doesn't care about us. And that phrase is not whispered anymore. It is shouted at rallies, written on protest signs, and echoed across social media. Here's the hook: frustration is powerful, but it is also unpredictable. Left unresolved, it can curdle into despair, withdrawal, and cynicism, people giving up on voting, on civic engagement, on democracy itself. But frustration can also ignite movements, solidarity, and demands for radical change. The direction it takes depends on whether there are leaders, organizations, and institutions ready to channel it into constructive transformation. History shows us that when public frustration reaches a breaking point, societies either move toward progress or plunge into turmoil. America today is standing right on that edge. Consider the workplace again. For years, union membership declined and employers celebrated. But now frustration has sparked a revival. Workers at coffee shops, warehouses, schools, and hospitals are rediscovering their collective power. They are saying enough. That resurgence is not about ideology. It is about lived experience. When people feel squeezed and ignored long enough, they begin to organize. That is frustration turning into action. At the same time, frustration is reshaping political attitudes. Younger generations, in particular, are questioning the very foundations of the economic system. They see climate change accelerating. They see inequality widening, and they ask, why should we accept this? Older generations may grumble quietly, but the youth are vocal, visible, and mobilized. That is why surveys show rising interest in alternatives, socialism, cooperative economics, new forms of democratic ownership. Frustration is pushing people to imagine what was once considered unthinkable. Yet we must not ignore the other possibility. Frustration can also be weaponized by demagogues who offer scapegoats instead of solutions. Instead of pointing at corporations or the wealthy elite, they point at immigrants, at minorities, at the poor. They take legitimate frustration and redirect it toward division. That is the danger of this moment. Frustration is rising, and the question is, who will harness it? Those who want transformation or those who want control? One thing is certain: frustration is no longer simmering quietly beneath the surface. It is visible in protests and labor actions, in political campaigns that reject the status quo. It is the undeniable pulse of a society that has been stretched to its breaking point. And when frustration spreads this widely, it is not a question of if change is coming. It is only a question of what form that change will take. History does not whisper, it shouts. And when we look honestly at the path America is walking, the echoes of the past are deafening. Every great society that allowed wealth and power to concentrate in the hands of a few eventually reached a breaking point. Rome, France before its revolution, Britain in its imperial decline, countless empires across centuries. The story repeats itself with chilling regularity. The warning is clear. When inequality deepens, when the majority feels excluded, and when governments serve only the privileged, societies do not remain stable. They unravel. The question facing America today is not whether history offers lessons, it is whether we have the courage to listen. Think about the fall of Rome. The empire stretched wide, its wealth flowing upward into the hands of elites who lived in excess while ordinary citizens shouldered the burdens of war, taxation, and debt. Over time, the gap between rich and poor became unbridgeable. Discontent festered, trust eroded, and eventually the mighty empire fractured from within. Now look at America. Billionaires amass fortunes greater than entire nations, while millions cannot afford health care or rent. Really believe our system is immune to the same dynamics that destroyed civilizations before us? Or take the French Revolution, where inequality reached intolerable heights. The aristocracy lived in luxury, indifferent to the hunger of peasants and workers. When bread prices soared and desperation spread, people rose up, not gradually, not politely, but explosively. Heads rolled and an old order collapsed. The hook here is simple. Inequality does not just provoke frustration, it provokes revolt. And revolt comes not when people are poor, but when they see the rich flaunting wealth in their faces while they struggle to survive. Look around America today at the yachts, the mansions, the billion-dollar companies paying no taxes. The ingredients are strikingly familiar. Even closer to our own time, think of the Great Depression. The roaring 1920s were hailed as a golden age, a time of innovation and wealth. But beneath the surface was the same imbalance we see now: speculation, debt, and a system that rewarded a few while leaving most vulnerable. When the crash came, it was devastating. Banks collapsed, unemployment soared, and families lined up for bread. The lesson? Economic systems built on inequality and instability eventually implode. And here we are again with speculative bubbles in housing, finance, and tech. Do we truly believe this bubble will never burst? But history is not only a warning of collapse, it is also a guide to possibility. In the wake of the Depression, people demanded change, and they got it. Social Security, labor protections, unemployment insurance. These reforms were not gifts from politicians, they were concessions to a public that refused to endure suffering without action. The hook is this: history shows us that when ordinary people push back, real transformation is possible. Without pressure, nothing moves. With pressure, even entrenched elites are forced to concede. Yet we must remember, history does not guarantee progress. Sometimes frustration produces liberation, but other times it breeds authoritarianism. In Germany during the same period, economic collapse fueled the rise of fascism. People, desperate for stability, turned to leaders who promised order while dismantling democracy. That too is a warning for America. Frustration and inequality can lead to solidarity and justice, but they can also lead to division, scapegoating, and repression. The direction depends on how society channels its anger and on whether movements for justice rise stronger than movements for control. Here is the most sobering hook. No society believes the warnings apply to it until it is too late. Elites in Rome, France, and Germany all believed their systems would endure forever. They thought wealth and privilege insulated them from consequences. But history came for them anyway. Today, American elites repeat the same arrogance that the system can stretch inequality endlessly without breaking, that people can be pushed down indefinitely without rising up. But history is knocking on our door, and it is saying otherwise. America stands at a crossroads, and the choice before us could not be starker. Something big is approaching, and whether it arrives as collapse or transformation depends on decisions we make right now. The signs are everywhere. Inequality at historic highs, political paralysis deepening, instability shaking the foundations of everyday life, and frustration spilling into the streets. These are not just symptoms, they are signals that a turning point is near. The hook is simple. History offers us only two outcomes, either a breaking apart under the weight of our contradictions or a breaking through into something new. Consider the first path, the path of collapse. If we continue on the trajectory we are on, the future will not be kind. Rising costs will squeeze workers even further while wages stagnate. Healthcare will remain a luxury for those who can pay and an impossible debt for those who cannot. Housing will become less about shelter and more about profit, leaving millions priced out. Political polarization will grow sharper as leaders deflect blame by scapegoating immigrants, minorities, and the poor. Social trust will crumble, and with it, the belief that democracy can solve our problems. Collapse does not come suddenly. It creeps in year after year until one day people wake up and realize the system they trusted has dissolved beneath their feet. But there is another path, one rooted not in despair, but in courage. Imagine a transformation where workers are not treated as disposable, but as decision makers, where companies are not owned and controlled by a tiny elite, but are run democratically by the very people whose labor keeps them alive. Imagine an economy where wealth is shared fairly, where healthcare and education are rights guaranteed to all, where housing is treated as a human need rather than a speculative commodity. This is not utopia, it is a choice. Other nations have taken steps in this direction, and history shows us that people, when organized, have the power to reshape entire systems. The hook that should grip us here is this: both futures are possible, but only one will happen. Collapse is the default. Transformation must be fought for. The system as it stands is designed to funnel wealth upward, to concentrate power, and to protect itself against change. That means if we do nothing, collapse is inevitable. Transformation, on the other hand, requires organizing, demanding, and refusing to accept the lie that nothing can be done. It requires the public to push harder than the elite resists. It requires courage, solidarity, and persistence. And we should be clear, transformation does not happen through hope alone. It happens through action. When workers strike, they are not just fighting for a contract, they are demonstrating a model of power. When communities organize to resist eviction, they are not only defending homes, they are challenging the commodification of shelter. When young people march for climate justice, they are not only asking for policies, they are insisting on a livable future. These actions are small pieces of the larger transformation, seeds that can grow into a new system if nurtured. But here is the danger. If people believe collapse is inevitable, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Apathy feeds decay. Cynicism breeds paralysis. That is why the battle today is not only economic or political, it is also about imagination. Can we still imagine a different America, one where the rules are rewritten to serve the many instead of the few? If we cannot imagine it, we will never fight for it. But if we can, then transformation is within our grasp. The choice between collapse and transformation is not abstract, it is immediate. Every policy passed, every protest organized, every election contested, every strike undertaken tips the scale in one direction or the other. The warning signs are flashing, but the future is not predetermined. It is shaped by what people are willing to do. And so the question hangs in the air like a challenge. When history looks back on this moment, will it say America collapsed under the weight of its contradictions, or will it say we seized the moment to create something new? My friends, we have walked through the evidence together: rising inequality, systemic instability, political paralysis, the frustration growing among millions, the warnings of history, and the stark choice between collapse and transformation. These are not isolated problems, they are interconnected threads of a single fabric that is unraveling before our eyes. Truth is unavoidable. Something big is about to hit America. The only question is whether it will be the shock of collapse or the breakthrough of change. Every empire that came before us thought it was invincible until it wasn't. Every ruling elite believed they could stretch inequality forever until the people proved them wrong. And now it is America's turn to decide whether we will repeat the mistakes of history or learn from them. The hook we cannot escape is this: the future is not written. It is not determined by Wall Street, by Washington, or by billionaires in their boardrooms. It is determined by what ordinary people are willing to demand, to fight for, and to build together. If we accept the system as it is, we accept collapse. But if we insist on something better, on fairness, on democracy in our workplaces and our politics, then transformation is not only possible, it is inevitable. So let us be clear: the storm is coming, but storms can clear the air as much as they can destroy. It is up to us whether we huddle in fear or rise with determination. It is up to us whether the big thing about to hit America is the end of an era or the beginning of a new one. History is watching, the future is calling, and the choice is ours.